Europe in the late 18th century was a powder keg of revolution and change. From this tumultuous landscape emerged a figure who would forever alter the course of history: Napoleon Bonaparte. Born in Corsica in 1769, Napoleon rose through the ranks of the French army during the French Revolution. His tactical brilliance and ambition quickly became evident, winning him both admiration and fear. Victory followed victory, and Napoleon's star continued to ascend. France, under Napoleon's leadership, expanded its influence across Europe. The Napoleonic Wars, a series of conflicts that engulfed the continent, were a testament to Napoleon's military prowess. The invasion of Russia in 1812, marked by hubris and miscalculation, decimated the French army. Paris fell in 1814, and Napoleon's reign finally came to an end. Exile on Elba did little to diminish Napoleon's ambition. He closely followed events in France, where the restored Bourbon monarchy struggled to maintain control. The French people, weary of war and yearning for stability, found themselves disillusioned by the restored monarchy. News of France's discontent reached Napoleon on Elba, fueling his belief that he could reclaim his throne. In February 1815, he escaped from Elba and landed in France with a small group of loyal followers. The return of the emperor sent shockwaves across Europe. Napoleon's journey from the coast to Paris was a triumphal march, with cheering crowds welcoming him as a returning hero. Within weeks, Napoleon was back in power, and Europe braced itself for another chapter in the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon's return to France sent shockwaves across Europe. The Congress of Vienna, intended as a celebration of peace and stability, was thrown into disarray. For Napoleon, the journey from Elba was not merely a physical return to France, but a calculated gamble. He banked on the French people's lingering affection for him and their disillusionment with the Bourbons. As Napoleon traveled from the coast to Paris, his small band of followers swelled into a formidable force. Soldiers sent to arrest him instead pledged their allegiance. Within weeks, Napoleon was back in the capital, his authority seemingly restored. The stage was set for a final, decisive confrontation. The Congress of Vienna found a renewed sense of unity in the face of a common enemy. Napoleon's return to France shattered the illusion of peace that had settled over Europe. Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Great Britain declared him an outlaw and an enemy of peace. The monarchs and diplomats gathered in Vienna pledged their resources and armies to the cause of defeating Napoleon once and for all. Across Europe, the drums of war began to beat once more. Armies recently disbanded were hastily reassembled. The stakes were higher than ever before. The coalition, united in its purpose, prepared to meet Napoleon on the battlefield. Napoleon, ever the astute strategist, understood the challenges he faced. Time, he knew, was his enemy. The coalition would waste no time in mobilizing its vast resources. He needed to act swiftly and decisively before the full might of his enemies could be brought to bear against him. His plan was audacious: strike at the heart of the coalition forces before they could fully unite. His target, the armies of Wellington and Blücher, positioned in what is now Belgium. It was a high-stakes gamble, one that relied on Napoleon's ability to outmaneuver and outfight his enemies in a lightning campaign. The 100 Days had begun. Napoleon's strategy hinged on a critical factor: speed. He knew that the combined might of the coalition armies, if allowed to unite, would be overwhelming. To succeed, he needed to keep them separated and defeat them piecemeal. His target, the armies of Blücher and Wellington. Napoleon's army surged across the French border into Belgium. Their advance was swift, their movements precise, their objective clear. The fate of Europe once again rested on the shoulders of these battle-hardened veterans. Napoleon aimed to exploit any perceived weaknesses in the coalition's deployments. On June 16, 1815, the small Belgian town of Quatre became the focal point of Napoleon's plan. Situated at a strategic crossroads, its control was crucial for both sides. Napoleon dispatched Marshal Ney with a substantial force to capture this vital junction. Ney's objective was to engage and delay Wellington's forces, preventing them from assisting Blücher. However, unforeseen delays hampered the French advance, giving the Anglo-Allied troops precious time to reinforce their positions. The battle that ensued was a brutal and chaotic affair. French cavalry clashed repeatedly with the determined infantry squares of the British and their allies. Despite being outnumbered, the Anglo-Allied troops fought with tenacity, repelling wave after wave of French attacks. While Ney's forces battled Wellington at Quatre, Napoleon confronted Blucher's Prussians near the village of Ligny. The clash was a ferocious encounter, a brutal test of strength between two experienced and determined armies. The French army attacked with their customary ferocity. The Prussians, renowned for their discipline and resilience, offered stubborn resistance. The village of Ligny, changing hands multiple times, became the epicenter of a bloody struggle. As dusk approached, the tide of battle began to turn in Napoleon's favor. A well-timed French cavalry charge sowed confusion and panic among the defenders. Despite the victory at Ligny, Napoleon's plan had not gone entirely according to plan. Following the engagements at Quatre and Ligny, the stage was set for a decisive confrontation. Wellington withdrew to a pre-selected position south of the village of Waterloo. The ground there, a gently sloping ridge, offered a natural defensive advantage. Napoleon, confident in the strength of his army, pursued Wellington with relentless determination. The fate of his empire, his legacy, rested on the outcome of this impending battle. The two armies converged on Waterloo, transforming the peaceful countryside into a theater of war. Wellington carefully positioned his troops along the ridge, their lines anchored by fortified farmhouses. Napoleon sought to identify weaknesses in Wellington's defenses, seeking the opportunity to unleash the full fury of his troops. The morning of June 18, 1815, dawned bright and clear over the fields of Waterloo. Napoleon, after delaying his attack to allow the ground to dry, unleashed the might of his artillery. The initial French bombardment inflicted casualties but failed to break Wellington's resolve. The Allied infantry, seeking cover on the reverse slope of the ridge, endured the onslaught with stoic determination. Wellington, a calm and resolute figure amidst the chaos, understood the importance of maintaining morale. He rode along his lines, his presence inspiring confidence in his men. As the French bombardment reached its crescendo, Napoleon prepared to launch his infantry assault. His confidence, however, would soon be tested by the tenacity of Wellington's troops and the unexpected arrival of a new threat. Following the thunderous artillery barrage, French infantry advanced towards the Allied lines. Their objective, to breach Wellington's center and break the Anglo-Allied army. The Allied infantry, their muskets loaded and ready, awaited the French onslaught. When the enemy came within range, they unleashed a devastating volley of musket fire. Despite suffering heavy casualties, the French continued their relentless advance. The Allied lines, though stretched thin in places, held firm. The battle raged throughout the afternoon, a brutal back-and-forth struggle for every inch of ground. The roar of artillery fire, the rattle of musketry, and the cries of the wounded created a deafening cacophony, a testament to the sheer scale and intensity of the fighting. As the infantry battled for control of the field, the cavalry of both armies clashed in spectacular engagements. The French cavalry charged repeatedly at the Allied lines, seeking to break through their formations. The British and Allied cavalry met the French charges with equal ferocity. Heavy cavalry regiments clashed head-on, their charges shaking the ground. The British Heavy Brigade, led by Lieutenant General Sir John Vandeleur, made a famous charge. Heavily armored horsemen smashed into the French lines, their sabers flashing. The French cavalry rallied and countercharged. The clash was a swirling melee of horses and riders, fought at close quarters, the air filled with the clang of steel, the screams of horses, and the cries of the wounded. These cavalry engagements, though visually striking, often proved indecisive. While they could inflict heavy casualties, neither side could deliver a decisive blow with cavalry alone. The fate of the battle would ultimately be decided by the infantry and the arrival of a new force on the battlefield. As the battle raged, a distant rumble reached the weary combatants. The sound of Prussian drums sent hope through the Allies and fear through the French. Napoleon, confident of victory, had sent Marshal Grouchy to delay the Prussians. However, Grouchy's efforts were insufficient. Led by Blücher, the Prussians were determined to join the battle. Their arrival boosted Allied morale and shook the French. Napoleon, facing a deteriorating situation, unleashed his last reserve, the Imperial Guard, his elite infantry, veterans of countless campaigns, the most feared soldiers in Europe. Their advance, a spectacle of military precision and unwavering discipline, was intended to break the Allied center and snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. The Imperial Guard, their bayonets fixed, their faces grim, marched across the battered field, their advance a terrifying spectacle. They had never known defeat, their reputation for invincibility preceding them. Their emperor, his hopes resting on their shoulders, watched their advance with a mixture of pride and desperation. The Allied troops, arrayed in their defensive squares, met the Imperial Guard's advance with disciplined volleys of musket fire. The ground shook with the impact of thousands of muskets firing in unison, the air thick with smoke and the stench of gunpowder. Still, the Imperial Guard advanced, their ranks thin but their resolve unshaken. However, the combined firepower of the Allied infantry, coupled with the growing pressure from the arriving Prussians, began to take its toll. The Imperial Guard, for the first time in their storied history, faltered. Their advance stalled, their ranks wavered, and then slowly at first they began to fall back. As the sun set on the blood-soaked fields of Waterloo, the day's events became chillingly clear. The French army, once the terror of Europe, was shattered, its remnants fleeing in disarray. Napoleon's dream of empire lay in ruins, buried beneath thousands of dead soldiers. The Battle of Waterloo marked the end of the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon was forced to abdicate once more. This time there would be no return. Exiled to St. Helena, he lived out his days a prisoner of his own shattered dreams. The legacy of Waterloo extends beyond the battle. It ushered in a period of relative peace in Europe. The Congress of Vienna sought to establish a new balance of power. The battle cemented Wellington's reputation as a brilliant strategist. The Duke of Wellington returned to England a hero. He later served as Prime Minister of Great Britain. The human cost of Waterloo must not be forgotten. The battlefields, silent now, serve as a somber reminder of the price of war. Tens of thousands of men lay buried in those fields. The legacy of Waterloo was written in the blood of those who fought and died there.